to Jonathan Taylor. Huge hole. He's at the 30. He's going to go. 10, 5, touchdown. Jonathan Taylor made a man miss the line of scrimmage and then runs it into Pater in a one-handed INT. Are you kidding me? Kenny Moore.
What a play by Nyheim Hines.
Horseshoe is back, baby. The horseshoe is back.
What's going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to Bring the Juice. On with me from Colts.com, Mr. JJ Stankevitz himself. JJ, you were out at camp today, man. How was camp for you here? Day number 5 for the Indianapolis Colts after taking yesterday off. How'd you enjoy another beautiful day down in Westfield?
It was a really nice day out there. It was good to see Frank Reich back after his isolation ended following a positive COVID test. He is fully vaccinated. He said he was feeling fine throughout the whole, period that he was isolated away from the team. But it was pretty clear that he was pretty happy to be back, seeing him, jump around with Bubba Ventrone and go up and high five or, fist bump every single player he could find. Good to have him back out there. And then, there were some sloppy moments in practice today. Some false starts, some substitution miscues. So after practice, Frank Reich held a longer than usual team talk where he kind of went about reestablishing some of the things that the Colts are looking for, some of the baselines, in terms of discipline on the field that he wants out of every single unit, not just the ones, but the 2s and the 3s. So it was a bit of a longer talk, but then we got into the issue of the day, didn't we, Cody,
yes,
with Carson Wentz?
We did, man. And for those people who haven't checked it out yet or heard the news, Carson Wentz elected and the Colts elected. I think it was kind of a decision there, a team decision to have him have surgery. Now, it was reported yesterday that Wentz might just try to rest and rehab, see where it was going. Well, the Colts felt like surgery was the best option, and obviously Wentz felt the same way. And so Frank Reich kind of gave that recovery time 5 to 12 weeks, which is majorly broad. It could be anywhere from, first week of the season to week number 4, week number 5. You just don't really know. Maybe even longer, depending on the recovery. What did you take away, I guess, from hearing about Carson Wentz's injury? Obviously, he's having surgery today at 4. What were your takeaways from really that and what Frank Reich said? Obviously he addressed that, but also what he said in terms of Jacob Eason.
I thought, starting with Carson, Cody, I thought it was really interesting something Frank said early on, that he told Carson his prayer for this whole thing was going to be that the decision would be clear. And that's what the Colts, Carson Wentz, and all the doctors who evaluated him believe they got to, is a clear decision that he does need to have a procedure to remove this broken bone from his foot. The Colts and the doctors believe that this fracture in his left metatarsal occurred possibly in high school, and he might not have known it. And he just planted, and one day, which happened to be Thursday, that little bone kind of came loose, and that caused quite a bit of pain and aggravation for Carson Wentz. Reich said that the Colts and Wentz, which I want to use them interchangeably, this was a completely joint decision, like you said, Cody, by all parties involved, the doctors, the team, the quarterback. They feel like they never were really going down that path of rest and rehab. Reich said, we could do it. He might be fine in a couple weeks, but then you run the risk of this happening again. Maybe, and maybe it doesn't even happen this season, but Chris Ballard in some, bit of wisdom he gave in this whole process was, this is a long-term thing with Carson Wentz. Like this is not, Phillip Rivers coming in for 1 year. This is the Colts want to, hitch themselves to Carson Wentz for the better part of this decade, and to risk this becoming a thing during a season at any point, whether it's week 4, week 5, week 12, week 18, that was a very large risk, because then you're looking at that same 5 to 12 week recovery timetable, but now you're missing nothing but games. You get the procedure done on Monday, August 2nd. If it's on that early end, which Frank Reich is hopeful that it can be. There are some reasons he's optimistic about that. Then you're talking about Wentz potentially being back for the, week 1, the first game of the season. It could extend longer, certainly. And Frank Reich said, we are going to have no idea how long Wentz is going to be out until he starts the rehab process, which won't begin until 2 weeks after today, today being Monday. The next 2 weeks for Carson Wentz are just do nothing. That's what Frank Reich said. So once he gets into that rehab process in a couple of weeks, then the Colts will have a better idea, to kind of narrow that timeline from 7 weeks down to something that'll be a little more tangible, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And it all depends, obviously, like you mentioned, just how Wentz really just recovers from this. It could be anywhere from it's a very broad. I think the Colts did that on purpose because you just never know with some of these injuries. It could be 5-6 weeks. It could be, 11 or 12 weeks. We just don't know exactly. So I think it was smart that the Colts didn't really set a timetable on it because nobody knows. Not even Carson Wentz knows at this point, kind of with that injury, when he's going to be fully recovered. But now all eyes are on Jacob Eason, quarterback number 1 for a while, at least, presumably all of training camp. What did you see from Jacob Eason today? And, talking about when Frank Reich talked about him and other people talked about Jacob Eason, where do they stand right now on him and his development?
So with Jacob Eason, we're hearing a lot about how these reps are going to be so invaluable for him. And Cody, I'm sure your viewers, your listeners know that Jacob Eason didn't really do much last year. In terms of tangible on-field practice. He was behind Phillip Rivers and Jacoby Brissett. So most of his work had to come before practice, after practice, in film sessions, taking mental reps, doing all these things that are helpful, but they're not as helpful as actually playing football. Right. So where Jacob Eason is now, there have been some ups and some downs. You can see the arm strength. Mo Alley Cox talked about it today, that when Eason's confident with where he's going with the ball, he gets the ball there. And you can see it on some throws here and there. He had a really nice one to Michael Pittman Jr. today where Pittman went up, made a contested catch, had a good throw on a wheel route that looked like to Darius Anderson, the running back. And then there have been some moments where the defense has played and got the better of it. EJ Speed had a really nice pass breakup today in 11-on-11. Bobby Okereke has been absolutely everywhere during training camp. And then the defensive line has been a pretty consistently disruptive force through these first 5 practices, whether it's been, Kwity Paye having a very strong start to his camp. Kamoko Toure has been very disruptive, looked very good. Ben Banigou, his motor, that he looks like he's got a little firelit under him this camp. Obviously, DeForest Buckner has been just lights out. Really good. Grover Stewart's had a very good camp. So that defensive line is also making things a little more difficult on Eason. And in that practice on Friday, which was kind of his first one with the first team offense, he had some plays where he moved in the pocket pretty well. It looked like he had a decent pocket presence. So I don't want to read too much into that because we're talking about a guy wearing a red jersey and no pads being on. Mm-hmm. But there did look like there's a decent amount of feel there. Eason certainly has the talent at quarterback. It's just going to be a matter of can Frank Reich, Marcus Brady, Scott Milanovic, these guys kind of get everything focused for Eason to the point where he is ready to go week 1, whether the Colts need him or not.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I agree with what you said about Eason's really not seen a whole lot of time. I think he had one of my, Lawrence Owen, who's a friend of the show. He said he had something like 32 snaps all of last year under center. So essentially he's still a rookie, JJ. Essentially he hasn't seen any game action. He hasn't really done anything at the NFL level to no fault of his own. You mentioned he was sitting behind 2 pretty good quarterbacks last year, and he was just kind of a practice squad type of guy last year, right? He was just sitting on the bench, learning and figuring out these things, absorbing like a sponge, it appeared. So, yeah, I think I agree with you. It's just going to take time with Jacob Eason. It's just going to take time, as it does with if you brought in a rookie quarterback. It's just going to take time with these guys adjusting to the NFL level, the speed, and all that stuff, and really playing against a defense. I think a lot of people look at this Jacob Eason stats or whatever, the unofficial stats that people keep, and they're like, man, it's not looking too good. But I'm like, I think a lot of people seem to forget that Jacob Eason's playing against a defense that was top 10 last year. Like, it's a good Colts defense. It's not like bottom half of the league or anything like that last year. This is a very good unit. And you mentioned, their Achilles heel last year was the pass rush. Well, it seems like the pass rush has not been an issue on the edge. It's been really, really effective so far. Yeah. So I think I'm willing to have grace with Jacob Eason. You mentioned it. He's got talent. I mean, there's a reason why some people, before he was drafted said he could go in the first or second round, and obviously fell to the Colts in the fourth round. And he has some things he has to work on. He's not a perfect player by any stretch, but I feel pretty good with Jacob Eason. And now that he's going to have multiple weeks knowing kind of what to prepare for and everything like that, I'm excited to see his development moving forward. You mentioned a couple of names, though, a couple of guys who stood out to you in camp. I know Bobby Okeriki's been a name as well that a lot of people have been saying, man, this dude's been around the football pretty much the entire camp. Are there any other guys that really stood out to you from this camp so far and even today that you're like, people need to be like keeping an eye out for these guys?
Who's made a pretty good amount of plays is Mike Strawn. There are a couple of guys I could highlight: Mike Strawn, Ben Banigou, obviously Bobby Okereke, EJ Speed. Seen Isaiah Rodgers make a couple plays here and there. I don't want to overanalyze the first 5 days of practice because the pads haven't come on yet.
Right.
It's good. It is certainly better than not that, I'm seeing Mike Strawn go up and high point some balls in the end zone and red zone drills. And looking like he can maybe, do that certainly, which we knew he could do, but maybe do a little more than that with this offense. We've seen Desmond Patman make a couple of plays. Paris Campbell could kind of go down the list. A lot of guys have made some splash plays here and there. When the pads come on, it is a completely different animal. And, Matt Eberflus even talked about that in relation to the defensive line, last weekend that, yes, Kwity Paye, really strong start to camp. Kamoko Toure, really strong start to camp. Ben Banigou, really strong start to camp. He said you almost have to reset when the pads come on, because he said he's been caught up in man, these guys are looking real good. Then the pads come on and they might not. So there might be guys who maybe haven't had strong starts to camp who all of a sudden the pads come on and it's noticing that guy a lot more. Or maybe guys who have had strong starts to camp, when the pads come on, they might fade a little bit. That's going to be so interesting over these next couple days. And the pads come on for the first time on Tuesday at Grand Park. So there's going to be a lot to watch for over these next couple practices.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of, guys that have kind of maybe not had the greatest or strongest starts to camp, how about the left tackles? It seems like we've heard nothing except these guys getting beat up to this point. Obviously, that's probably not true. They're probably holding their own pretty well at certain points. What has your impression been of these left tackles right now? Obviously, the fill-in for Eric Fisher, whoever that is.
Right, so we've seen Sam Tevy and Will Holden out at left tackle so far during camp. And, it's interesting because, yes, the defensive line is winning, but the D-line's winning everywhere. So it's almost sometimes kind of hard to isolate when it's just a relentless effort from this defensive line. So my take on it right now is that I'm more impressed by the defensive line than I am concerned about left tackle right now. That is just how I'm seeing this. We'll see as camp goes on, if we see some more progress. The other thing too with the offensive line that Matt Eberflus mentioned on Saturday is that when they don't have pads on, it's a lot more difficult to block. So I'm also going to start really looking at that left tackle spot again when the pads come on. Do Sam Tevy and Will Holden, whoever's out there on a given day, are they able to have more success against Kwity Paye, Kamoko Toure, these guys, Tyquan Lewis? Because all of a sudden the pads are on and it's just kind of easier to grab and to set when guys have pads on. That's what Eberflus said. So that's going to be something certainly to watch up at Grand Park these next couple days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of the offensive line, Quentin Nelson went out. Apparently, I think that what they said was he got his foot stepped on or something to that nature. Do you have any updates on him and kind of where the Colts feel like he is right now? What is the state of the injury based off of what they've kind of indicated so far?
I don't have any, information beyond what Frank Reich said on Monday. But look, whatever it is, I mean, does Quentin Nelson really need training camp? I mean, it's the same thing with Ryan Kelly. He's got the elbow. Yes, it's disappointing that Ryan Kelly's not out there, but also of all the guys on this team, I think Ryan Kelly's going to be ready for the regular season, no matter how many snaps he takes in training camp. I think the same goes for Quentin Nelson.
Mm-hmm. Well, for sure. Yeah, it's just always notable when your two of your best offensive linemen go out. So, always want to monitor that.
And that, by the way, that can contribute to other issues across the line that may be what you're kind of referring to, where all of a sudden you're missing your center and your left guard in a practice, and you got a left tackle out there in Sam Tebby, who's learning the offense, guy in Will Holden entering year 2. And all of a sudden now you got guys next to him that don't have as much experience. The drop-off from Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly, the Colts want it to be as low as possible, but Quentin Nelson's a 3-time All-Pro. Mm-hmm. Ryan Kelly's a 2-time Pro Bowler. Those are 2 of your best offensive linemen there. So, dealing with stunts and certain things that the defense is trying to install may be more difficult just based on the personnel that's next to the left tackle as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, JJ, in the coming days, what are some things that you are the most interested to watch and see how they play out?
Like we mentioned with the defensive line, how they play out in terms of, getting the pads on. But a couple of guys I want to watch here. Sam Ehlinger's got something to him. I don't know if Sam Ehlinger is going to push Jacob Eason to start week 1 if Carson Wentz does not play week 1. But I kind of like what Sam Ehlinger has been doing out there. Like and maybe this is just he's not taking the first team reps right now. So there's a little less scrutiny. When he makes a play, you're like, oh, that's great. But something he said when we talked to him on Saturday was about having a plan at the line of scrimmage. And I feel like I've noticed Ehlinger, that plan can show up when you're going through these 11-on-11 practices. He's got a little it factor to him at the quarterback position. That, not saying Jacob Eason and Jalen Morton and Brett Hundley and these guys don't have that. Ehlinger, this is why the Colts drafted him out of Texas, right? Like he's a winner at Texas, and he's got just sort of like that aura about him, like this Texas quarterback thing. I'm interested to see how he continues to progress. Obviously, Jacob Eason taking the first team reps, he's got to work on getting timing down with these receivers, getting a good chemistry going, just, getting his confidence up and going through his progressions. And the Colts believe those will come as he continues to get more reps. So I think you want to see kind of the arrow going up for Eason between now and, whenever it is in August. Because the one thing on Eason, Cody, is that you can show up to a couple practices at Grand Park and be like, I don't know about this guy, but it's August 2nd.
Right.
And, we have to view training camp as a totality. That one of the best ways that I ever heard put it was from an NFL lifer who I knew when I covered the Bears, who said the training camp practices are quizzes. Preseason games are tests. And at the end of training camp, you get your grade. And it's all kind of together. So Jacob Eason, maybe he has a day where he struggles a little bit in a training camp practice. Okay, that was a quiz. How does he do when the tests start coming against Carolina and Minnesota and Detroit? We got a lot of time before those games start. So, definitely his progress is going to be something I'm going to be following. But since we've talked a lot about quarterbacks, I am going to throw Paris Campbell out there. I want to see how he continues to progress, because so far what we've seen from Paris Campbell has been pretty good. Whether it was in OTAs where you're going against air and it's like, that guy looks quick. Then you get into the first part of training camp where you're in shells and you're like, that guy looks quick. Does he still look quick when the pads come on? I think he will. There's no reason to believe he won't. But Paris Campbell keeps this up. And if he can develop some chemistry now with Jacob Eason here in training camp, that's going to go a long way for setting him up for success this regular season.
Awesome. Yeah, we're really looking forward to seeing some of those things amidst other things, other positions. That'll be interesting and fun battles. But JJ, thanks for coming on, man. Really appreciate your time, and have fun the rest of this week, man. It's crazy that football's back, and it's been a very long off season. So excited to have it back, man.
Good to be back watching football, talking about football that's happening in front of our eyes, not on a TV screen or a friggin' Zoom call. It's really nice to be in person watching these practices.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, man. Well, you take care. Have a great rest of your day. And I hope you have fun at training camp, man.
All right. Thanks, Cody.
Yep. See ya.